Hello and welcome to the Neurodivergent Social Work Voices campaign. I am Florence Smith, the neurodivergent social worker and your host. If you've stopped in to listen, there must be a reason why. Maybe it's to listen to and learn from the first-hand experiences of neurodivergent, or as I like to call us, neurosparkly social workers, on how you can create a neuro-inclusive workplace. Or maybe you're seeking advice from other neurodivergent social workers about what works for them. Whatever your reason, it's nice to have you here, because for 1 month we will hear from 19 neurosparkly social workers. The conversations will explore 19 journeys, 19 unique neurological profiles, and 19 tips for other neurosparkly social workers. So, why has this campaign been launched? Well, it's been done with the vision to raise awareness, share knowledge, celebrate neurodivergence, as well as increase representation of neurosparkly social workers across the profession. You can find us everywhere from students, social work assistants, frontline professionals, educators, and managers. Today I am talking with Siobhan, a social worker with an acquired neurodivergence. Hello, Siobhan.
Hello, Florence.
I was wondering if you could please tell the listeners and me a little bit about your current role in social work.
Okay, so I think my current role is very unusual. I've been qualified for 32 years, and I think for about 25 years I've worked independently. And so my role can be incredibly varied, but it's predominantly training. I do quite a lot of training. I'm a practice educator, so I work independently with students. I do some independent supervision of senior managers, consultancy, and writing. So I tend to be seen as having an expertise in social work theory and critical reflection. So I do quite a lot of work in those areas, but in all sorts of different ways.
Please, could you tell me a little bit about what your neurodivergence is and how your brain sparkles?
I could. I like the way that you put that question, how my brain sparkles, because actually my neurodivergence shows up on brain scans. That's exactly how I know about it. So I suppose it sparkles on the brain scans. So 9.5 years ago, I had a stroke, which was caused by a dissected artery. And that left me with so the arterial dissection, then it creates some internal bleeding, and it basically left me with what doctors describe as brain damage. I don't like that phrase, but it's like white spots on the MRI scan. So there's parts of my brain that don't work anymore. Basically, they're gone. Those parts of my brain died during the stroke. So that, I suppose, has left me with a neurodivergence, really. So it's a stroke injury.
And a physically sparkly brain as well in pictures.
In pictures, yeah, I've seen the pictures sparkling.
Okay, and how does your neurodivergence make your brain work in comparison, say, to a neurotypical brain?
Okay, so I suppose for me, it's easier for me to describe how it used to work when I suppose I maybe did have a neurotypical brain, although sometimes I wonder whether it was ever neurotypical. So the difference that it made, I suppose, is the way that I think of looking at it. So it's made it much harder for me to read. I used to read for pleasure. I used to read a lot. Now, at first I couldn't read at all. I lost the ability to read anything and had to relearn to read in a different way. And so reading now I find very tiring. If I'm tired, my reading is really impacted, my ability to read. So reading is more difficult for me. I have relearned to read and I can read, but it's tiring, it's more difficult. So reading, I find taking on new things can take me longer than it used do. So taking on anything new can take me longer. Although that's not true for everything. So that I find that quite strange, because I can take on new ideas and new concepts and run with them and be, like I can hear, a new idea and run with that, get very excited by it and I run with it. But then if there's something, a new piece of, for example, one of the things I've found really hard since COVID is everything's now online. And as a trainer, if I was employed in a local authority, everybody would probably use the same Teams account or something, or you set up with a particular Teams account and it all operates. Whereas every authority I go into will have a different version of Teams or Zoom, or there'll be some other, newfangled account. And I was adding it up at one point, and I think I'd used 17 different online systems to deliver through. And I find that really hard when people say, "Oh, well, you just do this and you just do that." I just think, well, that's hard. Yeah, on new system. But new ideas I can work with. So there are some things that I find hard. I think I find it even difficult to, and I suppose I'm not prepared for the session today, but for our conversation today, but there are things that I find difficult to even explain what I find hard, so I even find it difficult to say, but it's really about taking on new things. It's sometimes about, if I'm concentrating on something and somebody comes in and asks me a question about something else, it throws me completely. So I feel like I'm almost I can only really concentrate on one thing at a time. I can't multitask in the way that I used to multitask.
Yeah.
So I become more absorbed in the activity. I think there are positives to each of those things. I think there's a positive to become more absorbed in an activity, in that I become more focused on it. I think I could give my time to it. And I think actually in some ways, I'm very much like that now. I will, say, for example, I'm doing a training day. So today I've been training a morning group and I had a different group in the afternoon. And there's loads of emails pinging around, there's loads of WhatsApps, and I ignore all of those because I'm with this group and I'm with that group. And I feel like that gives them a complete presence. I am completely present with them. I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm just thinking about them. And I do that because of my neurodivergence. Previously I'd have probably been trying to deal with those emails and the WhatsApps at the same time. And now I wonder, well, was I giving my full attention to the people at that point? So now I am where I am in that moment. I'm present with that group. And then when that group finishes, then I can look at those emails. Then I can look at those. So I've become more deliberate with my time and how I schedule my time. But I think that there's a positive to that. So I find it difficult really to even say, how does it impact? And reflecting on it, I wonder as well if that's because I work for myself. And ever since I've become neurodivergent, I've always worked for myself. Obviously I have, people that I do training for and things, but I work for myself. So I've just adapted. I don't need to think about, putting a request in for a particular adaptation. I am who I am and I work how I work, and I see that. So I don't ever really see it as being divergent, and I think over time as well, some of the issues of the stroke have impacted more significantly. Maybe as I've gone through the menopause, some of the brain fog of the menopause has also impacted the stroke. So that's not a neurodivergent issue, but it impacted on my neurodivergence, so there's all those kinds of things, I suppose. I don't know if that answers the question well enough.
Definitely. And I really get the sense of the challenges and the strengths being the different sides of the same neurological coin, in the sense of having that big picture thinking of new ideas and theories, and then on the other side of that coin, finding the more tedious small processes of online systems being that little bit more difficult. Well, thank you for sharing, Siobhan. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience of social work, so being a neurosparkly social worker?
Yeah, no, you see, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Could you tell me about your experience of social work? And I almost want to start at the beginning of my career and take you all the way through my career, and that's 32 years with, so that's a bit tricky. If I think about my social work and the neurodivergence, then in some ways that is interesting, because one of the things that the stroke has left me with is I really struggle with names. I've really struggled to remember names. And it is something that names, I don't know if it's that part of my brain that was, died off, but I just struggle with names. And I think there was a stage where I did try and go back to direct practice as a social worker. And that was really problematic, because if somebody's phoning me to talk about a child and they use a name, I couldn't connect that just hearing the name without seeing the child's face. I tried to have photographs and it just became too problematic. So I suppose my view of that was, okay, well, I won't go back to direct practice. I'll work with, students, I'll do to maintain practice links. So it's hard to, I suppose, even think about when you say your experience of the neurodivergence and social work. There's elements of social work that I think I've let go of.
Yeah.
But I've done that because I could, I used to always do a few days a week still in practice to maintain practice links, which then influenced my writing and my training. Mm-hmm. And I let go of that because it was problematic. Now, if I'd have wanted to, I could have found strategies to address that. If that had been my 5 days a week job, I would have found strategies to address it. But when I thought about it, I thought, well, the main aspect of my role is training and writing. And I can keep the concept, I've done the work with children and families because I wanted to maintain practice links. And I thought I can maintain practice links in different ways. So I just adapted. I've just adapted and always kept to why was I doing that, and then finding a different way of doing it. So I think if you hold on to your why, your how can be different. How do you do that can be different.
And that's almost that creative thinking as well, of actually kind of what could practice look like now that my brain's sparkly.
Yeah. And how do you build on the strengths, I suppose? And so, for example, so many people have said to me, "Oh, we really like your cards," and I didn't write the cards before I was neurosparkly, and they came out of that. They came out of the fact that reading was difficult for me. I wanted to get back into writing, but writing, it connected with the reading, because you got to read back what you've written. It was challenging for me and very tiring. So I thought, well, what I can do, instead of writing a book, the first thing I wrote after I had the stroke was the cards, because I thought I can write those as, if I'm really tired, I can just write one and it can just stand alone.
Yeah.
And it was easier to write in a separated way. And then so many people have said, we love those cards, people who are, neurosparkly and people who aren't neurosparkly, the whole range. So I suppose it's about looking at the strengths and thinking, okay, actually, that something great came out of that, actually. So
definitely. I know for me, it made theory feel a little bit more accessible, in the sense of, if I wanted to read a little bit about a theory before I kind of reflected on whether that was evident in my practice or how it showed up in practice, it meant I wasn't reading through kind of reams of information just to kind of gather the essence. You had done, in my opinion, a really good job of getting the essence of a theory and making it accessible, in terms of using clear and simple language and getting rid of all of the jargon.
I suppose I saw them as almost a translation of what worries me is that sometimes people, I think, oh, I'll just use those. Well, you can't just use those. You have to do the reading. But as you've said, Florence, you could use the card to think, is this relevant? Okay, well, it might be worth me going and reading about it then. To save you doing tons of irrelevant reading, it almost helps that. It helps you to plan the reading so that you're only reading what's going to be useful to you. Or it helps you if you are reading something and you think, I really don't understand this. You can look at the card and think, okay, it translates it for me. So there's a couple of different ways of using it, I think, if you are neurodivergent. So, yeah. I also think the fact, you can play games with them and you can do things with them and be more creative with them. That's very neurosparkly. I don't think I'd necessarily have thought of those games before.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been able to. And I can think very quickly now. I can think creatively very quickly. Like, I've just done a training session this afternoon and I completely changed what I was planning to do just because of the group, and I did something different. And I can do that much more easily than I could before. So I would have needed a strategy. Now, I think that's interesting because some people who are neurosparkly will tell me that they take longer to process and to change plans. For me, I've found I'm quicker at changing plans. I can move over more quickly.
And what advice would you give to other neurosparkly social workers?
Yeah, this is a tricky one, really, isn't it? Because I suppose there's so much advice. I mean, one thing that I would say is draw on your social work skills to understand yourself, and in the same way as you use your self-awareness skills in social work. So it's that connectivity. But I suppose what I'd say is, in social work, we build on people's strengths. We shouldn't be looking through a deficit lens, in the same way we shouldn't in terms of being neurodivergent. Draw on, okay, rather than thinking about what I can't do, and I focus now entirely on what I can do rather than what I can't do, and keep that focus. So build on the strengths that your neurodivergence brings, because it will do. But it's easy for me to say that. One of the things that I'm very conscious of is that I do have people who have had strokes who contact me, and they're working in local authorities, and they have a really different experience to me. If there are days where I feel like I just can't write very much today because I've not got that ability, then I'll do something else. I'll make a video, or I'll use the day differently. So if I've got a day of writing planned and I'm not able to write, I can do something else. But if I worked for a local authority, I can't do that. I can't be as flexible. I can't be, because I'm my own boss.
Yeah.
And so, people who've had a stroke will contact me and say, I'm really struggling with this. I'm really struggling with that. And it's difficult to advise them, because really it's not their issue. It's the environment. It's that, that's what we should be doing as social workers, is seeing the person in their environment. And so I suppose the advice that I'd give you is, if the environment isn't supporting you in a way which is effective, isn't looking at reasonable adjustments, because the reasonable adjustments that they make, they get so much from us, in terms of the value.
Mm-hmm.
And so I suppose what I'd say is, if that environment isn't working for you, don't internalize that. Move environments. That job's not the right role for you, that they're not valuing you, then move on. It's being creative in finding the coping strategies. And it's also, I think in the early stages, I did beat myself up a bit. And there was quite a lot of shame. I carried a lot of shame. And now I reflect on, why did I carry shame? I had a dissected artery, really. So, but I think, don't beat yourself up. Talk about it. And I think it's fabulous, actually. And the work that you've done as well is amazing, Florence, as part of that, raising the profile and enabling people to talk about their neurodivergence and to see it positively. Because I think previously it was very hidden, and it was like, oh, I'm not going to talk about it. And there was a lot of shame in there. So I think the more that we talk about it, the more that we don't feel a sense of shame, the more we won't beat ourselves up. If something doesn't work one day, well, it might work the next day, So I think that's important.
So I just want to say thank you for giving your time to celebrate neurosparkliness and neurodivergence in social work, and for sharing your experiences. And I'd also like to thank everyone who has listened. If you're interested in learning more about neurodivergent social workers and neuroinclusion, please check out the Neurodivergent Social Worker website and the British Association of Social Workers Special Interest Group. The link for the website and the Special Interest Group will be in the description below. Thank you.